In this video, we're going to deal with several things. We're going to talk about the Truman effect. It's a favorite. We're going to talk about some of the phenomena that goes along with gang stalking. We're going to talk about time dilation. We're going to discuss a lot of things. Whether you're a new targeted individual or a seasoned veteran, there's no denying that there is a lot of strange phenomena, a lot of seemingly unexplainable activity that goes along with gang stalking. Most of the people that call themselves targeted individuals have experienced some pretty, strange things. People talk about the hive mind. They talk about personalized street theater from strangers. People start experiencing break-ins, workplace harassment. It might even involve people in your social circle or maybe even in your family. For the most part, there's usually a split. There's the before and after effect where, even though a lot of people consider themselves targeted individuals, maybe even lifelong, it does seem to become more intense at a certain point in time. A lot of targeted individuals look back in hindsight and they see the comments, they see the innuendos, and, I like to call that the foreshadow stage because, it's nothing that anyone would really pay attention to because you really have no reason to. You just look at it as if it's a strange comment. Maybe someone's in a weird mood or whatever. They're just trying to, yank your chain or freak you out. You don't know. You're not paying attention, but later. And that's what it's for. It's for later. Well, it makes a whole lot more sense. I've talked about that before. The targeted individual is prepped. They are prepared for that crescendo event, that shock and awe that lets them know that they are in a scenario, that they are being hunted. And, the world around them that they thought they understood, it's a whole lot different than they thought it was. I know I experienced that. And there's probably a lot of new targeted individuals out there who are listening to this who are probably wondering what's going on, wondering why the things are happening the way they are, how things are being done, why, and how strangers seem to know their personal business, how the logistics of this are playing out, how it is that people can set things up in advance, how when they get into a situation, maybe they're on the run or, trying to find some peace, and it just seems like there's no way out. We're going to discuss those things tonight. There's actually a lot of ways that this can manifest. A lot of people assume that people have pried into their personal information, that they have hacked their phones, maybe put cameras in their house, maybe that they've been studied, profiled, and that can happen. Okay, I've talked about that before, where, it really wouldn't take that much. If you had some resources, if you had a little bit of extra time, you could follow someone. You could track them with their phone. You could find out where they shop. You could find out their habits, their schedule, and you could set things up. You could create that type of illusion. You could have people harassing them, maybe in their neighborhood, in their apartment complex, in the places that they shop, in the place that they go eat dinner. You could have all kinds of things set up, make it look random. And it would seem like everyone was in on it, no matter where they went, whether they were in traffic or whatever. You'd have to have some resources, okay? There's no denying that. And, just the fact that targeted individuals deal with that type of scenario? They try to figure it out. I mean, is it a group of people who have, just selected them as a scapegoat, as some type of little toy that they're going to play with? Is it the government? They've got a lot of resources. I've talked about that before, where a lot of people assume, especially the targeted individuals who deal with a lot of, harassment in other geographical areas. Targeted individuals have a tendency to get fed up and leave. What do you expect? You got to try something. And if you're getting harassed in a community and, there's just nothing you can do, well, you're eventually going to leave. But like all targeted individuals, they find out that, well, it's waiting for them when they get to their other location. Okay, there's other people out there that maybe have jobs. I experienced that, where you're traveling around and, the logistics seem to fall apart. A lot of people rely on that government explanation, because the government does have a lot of resources. If they wanted to put someone on you to track, hunt you down, follow you, they got the money to do that. They do have the manpower, but it just depends on the scenario. I don't think that it has to be any of those things, really. I mean, you would think that it would have to be, right? If someone knows things that you're talking about, maybe, or whatever, in your apartment, or, hanging out with a friend in your vehicle, maybe even out in the country or whatever, that somehow they'd have a listening device, maybe hacked into your phone or whatever. But I think there are other explanations for these things. I really do. And, when it comes down to it, if you've listened to my channel, you know where I'm going. I'm going to the spiritual explanation for this stuff, because when it gets into the higher forms of harassment, where, especially when you're dealing with someone who's on the run, who's just, fed up, trying to find some peace, maybe checking into a hotel. A lot of targeted individuals get chased, and they end up, just trying to get away. They might not have enough money to move or whatever, but, they can go to a city maybe a couple 100 miles away. They're experiencing a lot of sleep deprivation or whatever. And they check into that hotel, and, it might not even be 5-10 minutes. And, someone checks in next to you. Or, something happens to where it's undeniable harassment. How does that work? Could all these people be in conscious collusion together? Really? And it can get even worse than that, okay? It can get to the point where it's ridiculous. And I've heard of a lot of different explanations where there's, command centers and, all kinds of different operatives that are just waiting in different places. But I don't know. It seems to fall apart. The local Quickie Mart, the gas station, the shopping mall, the doctor's office, it doesn't seem possible. And I don't think that in that way it really is. Now, it could happen. I mean, if there's time for these things to be set up, you've got two options. Someone could be doing that. They could be paying people off. There could be a disinformation campaign. It is possible. Or it's something else. Okay. And, I was talking to one gentleman one time, and he was telling me that he pulled into a parking lot and he was being followed by someone, and he had seen them before. And, and it was actually in a different city. And when he got to this parking lot, in a completely different city, there the person was. How does that work? Okay. And I talked about the fact, when I started this video, we're going to discuss some of these things, okay? We're going to talk about the Truman effect, where targeted individuals believe that everyone is watching them, that, wherever they go, people seem to know their business like they're on some type of reality show or whatever. It's an experience that a lot of targeted individuals deal with. Okay. And, there are a lot of explanations. But, when it comes to people leaving their geographical area, getting harassed in multiple locations, well, I think it comes down to a spiritual explanation. And I think the time dilation plays into it. And you guys all know what that is. You can look into it. And, depending on, where you are relative to the center of gravity and all those different things, you can experience time differently. And when you're dealing with dimensions, when you're dealing with a spiritual dimension, well, they have a different perspective. Okay. And I think, I'm being hypothetical. I'm speculating, but I would guess that's how a lot of these things happen. Okay. And I've talked about before that a lot of people get street theater that almost seems clairvoyant. Okay. And a lot of people who, have been in the circles that have the occult and stuff like that. A lot of people talk about the Freemasons. Okay. And things along the lines of the Illuminati and all those. And they're related. It all goes back to ancient Egypt, and it's dealing with hidden wisdom, hidden knowledge. A lot of people talk about those things, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, witchcraft, black magic, and all that stuff. But I think it really comes from the same place. I think that, there is a different perspective for the spiritual dimension. And, when it comes down to it, when targeted individuals are dealing with that, where it seems like things are set up in advance, I think they really are. Literally. I don't believe that they are reading your mind. I think that, there's a lot of possibilities that go along with the spiritual realm. They can certainly put things in your mind. And, for me, I look at it as, a possibility. A lot of people wonder that. They wonder if, the devil can read your mind or whatever. Well, I don't know. Would it really matter? Would it? You kind of got to get over that stuff. And I think it's possible. I don't know. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is hypothetical, but I don't think that's really what's going on. If you've got something planned or whatever, and you assume that someone is reading your mind and that's how they know, I don't think so. I think it comes down to a different perspective. I think the spiritual dimension can literally, see these things before we do. They're experiencing time differently. And I think it explains a lot. A lot of people in religion and theology, they get caught in these philosophical conundrums. Well, if God knew this was going to happen, why did he do it? Well, maybe there's other explanations, okay? Because why would God do something if it wasn't real? Right? A lot of people talk about predestination and they take it out of context. They take all that stuff, God's foreknowledge, out of context. They don't use it properly. I mean, I could make a video about that if you want, but they take it into that philosophical realm where, God just knew it and he preordained it, and it's just to display his power. And, why didn't he just create a bunch of robots or little stuffed animals or something then? I think there's other possibilities to where I think it's real. I think there are possibilities. And I think that God watches these things from his perspective, and he's sovereign, and he can work them out as he chooses, but it's real. It happens. And, even though he, has a different perspective, even, from that of probably the kingdom of darkness, they're ahead of us, but they don't have the perspective that he does. And I think that ultimately God has to say whether he's going to allow something, whether he's going to let it happen, but he's not necessarily ordaining those things. And so this goes into a lot of different areas. And rather than to assume that, these people are reading your mind or whatever, they could be, being affected by the spiritual dimension. Okay, because these people are obviously, not, God-fearing Christians. I mean, some of them might pretend that they are. If you deal with those ones, they can be pretty deadly. But, they are definitely not children of the light. They're not in Christ. These people are engaged in something that is, evil, that is illegal. And, when people do that, they are being influenced. And, that goes into street theater as well, which kind of touches on the hive mind, right? Because, the Bible is very clear, about the scenario that is going on, okay? All the way from the Garden of Eden, okay? And there's a lot of things that people just aren't aware of. First, we had the angelic rebellion. Then, of course, we had the fall in the Garden of Eden. Then we had, another situation where there was a mixing of, angels and humans, right? And, a lot of people think that was the Nephilim, but I think the Bible is talking about that the Nephilim were in the earth at those days. Maybe they were the watchers that people talk about. And then, of course, we had the Tower of Babel, and God was pretty much fed up at that point. Okay. And, he parceled out the nations according to the sons of God. The Bible talks about principalities and powers. And, they ruled, and they still are. And they're cruel taskmasters. We're not supposed to like this stuff. Okay? It's God's wrath revealed against mankind. And we have the choice to submit to God, which I think explains a lot of things that we're dealing with, and be in Christ. And, really that's the only way out of this whole thing. And, this life is just a sliver of your existence. But getting back to the point, until Christ returns, these principalities and powers, well, they're ruling the planet. And then, of course, we had the flood, right? Because we had that mixture of, angelic and human DNA. It talks about the giants and so forth. A lot of people don't like to interpret it that way, but when the Bible talks about it, it also mentions Sodom and Gomorrah, and it talks about immorality, and I think you really can't get out of it when you look at the whole scenario in context. And, when it comes down to, people who are influenced by spirits, it talks about unclean spirits. And that is basically dealing with what, the Hebrew would consider a mixture, right? Unclean, or a bastard spirit. So when you had the mixture, the people that died that were of angelic and human origin in the flood, right? They were disembodied. And those spirits are the spirits that you're dealing with at that point. And I think those, I'm speculating, are some of the ones that are influencing the people that are involved in this whole scenario that you're dealing with. And I also think it's an explanation of how some of the, personal information is known by some of these people, and I've talked about before, where it's kind of like the movie Fallen, and it's not always like that. I'm not trying to remove culpability of people who are involved in this type of activity, but it can be that way, okay? And, rather than to believe that these people are inside your head or whatever, or reading your mind, I think they have partial knowledge. I think that, there are people out there who, are affected in ways where they don't understand. And I think there's people who do know they're involved in something. And, they're eventually going to be judged. I've talked about that before, where don't believe the lie, because by ad populum, observation, it seems like, you're in the losing side of this equation, because, as far as the majority is concerned, especially for targeted individuals, you're outnumbered. And, the majority of the population of the world is going in that direction, right? The in-group, so to speak, the social dynamic that is very powerful is going that way. I've talked about that before. You can have a group full of people, and they've done tests to prove this stuff, where they can take out two sticks. One stick is obviously longer than the other one, and they'll have everybody coached, and then they'll have the test subject or test subjects to where everybody in the group is going to say, oh, no, that stick is longer than the other one. And it obviously isn't. But just because people don't want to be the odd person out, they don't want to be out of the in-group, they'll go along with it. And it's a powerful dynamic. It is. And it's something that targeted individuals deal with. And for me, that explains the hive mind, okay? A lot of people, they'll say it's, technology, some type of frequency that is being beamed out over a city center or whatever. You can believe whatever you want. I mean, maybe. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I hold to the biblical criteria. It's very important to me. And, if what I said was true about the principalities and powers, well, they're ruling the whole planet. When you think you're running somewhere, when you think you're going to get away, when you move to another city or experience harassment in an area out of your geographical location, well, that would explain it. It would also explain how, people are, in that place where they have personal information about you and they're not connected to anyone. The logistics seem to fall apart when it comes to a conscious collusion for the higher forms of harassment. But when you get into the spiritual explanation, it makes perfect sense. Okay? And a lot of people don't want to believe this stuff. And, as far as, the way, religion is, as far as Christianity, there's a lot of people out there who are misrepresenting the Bible. They're teaching legalism, or they're greedy charlatans. And, a lot of people don't understand how that can be possible, if God is who he says he is. But you know what? He's allowing these things. And believe it or not, God's modus operandi is to use the weaker things, the things that the enemy has brought against him for the very purpose of accomplishing his will. And even though some of these people are misrepresenting the Bible has prophesied that they were going to be there. The greedy, charlatans, all of them. And even though, in their hearts, they're not working for God, God can use them. And it's up to each and every one of us to seek out the truth, to understand, what the truth is about the Bible, and our responsibility that goes along with that. And so when, even those people, God can use. And so, if someone uses that as an excuse to kind of write off the legitimacy of the spiritual realm, or, heaven and hell and all that, the reality of Christ, I just don't think it's a good reason. I don't think it holds water. And for that reason, a lot of people talk about implants and different forms of technology as to how all these things are being done, and how these people, these agents, these operatives know where you're going to be, what you're thinking, all these different things. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, okay? And instead of, looking for lumps on your body, which I do believe technology can be used. I'm not saying that stuff's not legitimate. There's evidence that the government is messing around with this stuff. And I've talked about before that I believe that technology and the spirit realm are connected. But, the solution is the same. And I think the origins, even if that's the case, even if you have an implant, even if there is something like that going on, I think the solution's the same. I do. And I think there is only one way out of this. And, whether these people get caught, whether they're brought to justice in your lifetime, in my lifetime, and I hope they are, and I think it's a possibility that they could. I pray that every day, multiple times. But even if they don't, I know eventually targeted individuals will be vindicated. All these things will be put in the right place. And, I think the spiritual explanation explains all these things. Whether you've experienced that type of street theater, whether you feel like you're in some type of reality show like the Truman Show, or, if people are reading your mind, you're wondering about all these things. I think that's probably what's going on. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. I'm not saying that these things can't manifest in a lot of ways, but, if you want to, check into the biblical stuff, I would recommend Dr. Michael Heiser first. Look into some of that. It'll give you an idea of what's going on and how these things can be possible and what you're possibly dealing with. Guys, be good to yourselves. Be safe.